I'm going to talk about how I've used performance storytelling to tell LGBT history. For many years as a sociologist, I had a conventional academic career. It was shaped by my PhD thesis. This thesis, it's quite heavy, all 380 pages of it. It was on the heavy subject of mixed marriage, which in Ireland meant a marriage between a Catholic and a Protestant. I was adopted academically as a graduate student at Nuffield College, Oxford. There I was brought up to believe in positivism. Positivists believe that we can apply the thinking and practice of the physical sciences to the study of human social life. As a positivist, I was taught to believe there is only one method, and that method is positivism. The method is objective. Findings are based on evidence. The best evidence is official records. If official record is unavailable, use quantitative questionnaires. Above all, never allow yourself to become emotional. I was a very good positivist. When I wrote my PhD thesis, I tried to be scrupulously objective. I used official records, and when they were unavailable, I used quantitative questionnaires. I never allowed myself to become emotional. Other positivists, they loved my work. It was published in academic journals. Journals which were placed on a shelf in a university library. Or they were stored securely online behind a paywall. Few people ever got to read what I wrote about mixed marriage. I was rewarded with a well-paid academic job at Queen's University Belfast and led a successful conventional academic career. But I always had my doubts about positivism. I felt uncomfortable that in this volume of 380 pages with my name written on the spine, the I, me, Richard, is entirely missing from it. Nowhere in my published pages did I mention that I was myself in a mixed Catholic-Protestant relationship, a same-sex relationship. I deliberately left myself out. I used official data on couples from Ireland's Census of Population 1991, the official state census, which my partner and I completed. But this official record did not record same-sex relationships. It did not record my own relationship. When I began this research in 1993, same-sex relationships were still criminalized in the Republic of Ireland. The method of positivism was arid, and so was the content it produced. This research was not authentic. It wasn't true for me. It reminded me of the insight by Karl Marx on how workers become alienated from their own labor. I felt that I'd become alienated from my own labor, from my own personal gay history. I increasingly became aware that my practice was complicit in my own erasure. In 2010, I left academia to become a carer for my partner. But in 2016, I did deliver a public lecture at Queen's University to mark LGBT History Month. The title of the lecture was The Faithful Underground, 40 Years of Christian and Gay Witness in Northern Ireland. This is a subject I had personal experience of as a gay activist. On the day of that lecture, I decided to finally leave the positivist faith. That day in 2016, I abandoned my conventional script and gave what we might call a performance lecture. A performance lecture where I included a story where the queer I was restored. There I was back at Queen's University in a lecture room, once again in front of a university audience. While the audience wondered why the PowerPoint hadn't been turned on, I made an announcement. Before the start of this lecture, let's get the protest out of the way. And I held up a placard. This type of protest is familiar to the LGBT community in Northern Ireland. I'd experienced it myself when as an activist I'd spoken in public against Christian homophobia. Then I addressed the audience. Today is Ash Wednesday, the 10th of February 2016, and I can see by looking at your foreheads that you haven't kept the feast day. 27 years ago in 1989, when I was a student here at Queen's University, Ash Wednesday was a sort of Catholic coming out day. Catholic students like me emerged from the chapel with our foreheads smudged with ash in the sign of the cross. Protestants had Poppy Day, Catholics had Ash Wednesday, a day of community visibility. The late 80s, that's the 1980s, not the 1880s, wasn't an easy time to be gay in Northern Ireland. Those of us gay and lesbian students at Queen's University were not visible. On Tuesday nights, on the top floor of the Students' Union, we'd huddle together, all 6 of us, with me wearing my gay clone leather hat. That performance lecture became, by the following year, my first performance storytelling show. Telling LGBT history through theatre is, of course, not new. Among the practitioners are Peter Scott Prestland, the founder of Homo Promos Theatre Company. You'll be hearing from Peter in this conference. Rose Collis has for many years been performing the LGBT archive. In Northern Ireland, we've had Shannon Yee's Trouble. Trouble, with its imaginative form and staging, is based on verbatim interviews with local LGBT. While Niall Ray co-wrote Drag, D-R-A-G, about a drag queen's relationship with a closeted paramilitary, and performed by an actor. Most recently, we've had, as part of the Out in the Past Festival, Dominic Montague's play, Queer Ceilidh at the Marty Forsyth. But this is not what I do. I describe what I do as performance storytelling. The stories I tell of LGBT history are not only autobiographical, but I perform them myself. That is, I perform my own gay history. I first performed my gay history at the Mac Theatre, Belfast in 2017 as part of the Outburst Queer Arts Festival. Here's the Outburst Festival programme for 2017 with its cute cover. And I'll read you its description of my show called There's a Bishop in My Bedroom. If you've ever been whacked by the crozier, you'll know how it feels. Written and performed by Richard O'Leary, There's a Bishop in My Bedroom is a hugely entertaining new one-man show that riffs on the familiar local theme of religiously mixed marriage to address a very contemporary topic, same-sex love and equal marriage. Emerging from Outburst's new queer writing workshops with Tinderbox Theatre Company, this performance combines Irish oral traditional storytelling with folk theatre to take on sex education, sourcing illegal condoms in 1980s Dublin, falling in love, religiously mixed and same-sex relationships, and facing the realities of end-of-life care. Based entirely on Richard's own extraordinary story, we follow his early years as a would-be priest in Cork, to coming out as a gay man and falling in love with a Protestant who would become his lifelong partner. Directed by Patrick J. O'Reilly, this is wonderfully feral, funny, raw, and deeply affecting storytelling theatre. I'll now play you a short video recording from that show. It's not actually recorded at the Mac Theatre. It was recorded at the Brian Friel Theatre in Queen's University. When I was 6 years old, my dad took me on his knee and he said, "Richard, one day you'll be a priest."
I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to be a priest. I didn't even really like a priest. But my dad was keen that one of his 4 sons would enter the priesthood. When I was 12 years old, my dad said to me, "Richard, one day you'll be a bishop." I looked at my dad and I thought, one should be careful for what one wishes. Before I could become a priest, I first had to be confirmed by the bishop. To be confirmed, you have to pass the catechism exam. The catechism exam is based on a book called the Catechism, and it's a book with over 200 questions. And if you didn't pass the catechism exam, the bishop wouldn't confirm you. So there's no pressure on us then. I wonder how many of us would get on if we had to answer the questions in the catechism. I wonder how our audience would get on if you were asked questions from the catechism. It just so happens that I brought with me tonight a copy of that childhood book, the Catechism. And to ask it questions, let's bring on a bishop. What does the 6th commandment tell us? The 6th commandment tells us to respect sex and not to misuse it, either with others or by ourselves. 12-year-old me had no idea what the bishop meant by misuse sex by ourselves. Let's have the bishop ask you a second question. Does the church forbid marriages between certain persons? The church forbids marriage between certain persons, such as a near relative, or a Catholic and a non-Catholic. I wasn't too worried about being forbidden to marry a non-Catholic. I didn't know any non-Catholics.
I'll take you on now to a second clip later in the show.
Students, and I'd go home to my beloved Mervyn. And during all these years, we were celebrating our anniversary. And you might be thinking, how can they have an anniversary because they're not even legally married? Well, we just declared the date that we had met, the 11th of February 1989, as our anniversary. We exchanged a really romantic card, like this card. It's a pajama top with the buttons in the shape of hearts. And in the top there were 2 kind of furry creatures, whiskers, kind of snuggling up to each other. And in the pocket there are 2 toothbrushes next to each other with the kind of bristles rubbing off each other. And inside it says, "Dear N, love me do. I know you do. I love you too." Or is me, and M is Mervyn. You may be wondering, why do we use our initials? And I realized we use our initials, M and R, because of our experience of the criminalization and the need of secrecy. And that's why we weren't using our full names. So no, item I kept, table in my bedroom.
You'll have noticed there that my use of objects to tell the story. And the first object I showed you was the actual catechism book from my childhood, which was given in the 1970s. And the second object which I showed you was a card, which I had given my partner in the early 90s. This card of a pajama top with heart buttons and a pair of affectionate furry creatures and 2 toothbrushes nuzzling each other in the pocket. And I read out from the inside of the card a message: "Dear M, love me do. I know you do. I love you too. Or." And I told the audience that On the card, I'd use initials rather than full names, which was evidence of a hangover from our experience as a same-sex couple under criminalization. And so my method might still be seen as objective, but in a different way from the positivist. Maybe it is, though, a lingering influence of empiricist positivism. Because I also realize that some members of the audience might think these stories from our LGBT lives are incredible, that they're unbelievable. And so, to help convince the audience, I came prepared with persuasive physical evidence. Furthermore, because these are physical objects, they are meant to be seen. So this telling of LGBT history is meant to be seen and not just heard or read. These and other objects, I never call them props, they are not inert. Given the experience of LGBT, of oppression and the need to keep much of our lives private, and the awareness of incriminating written records, physical objects, these souvenirs of our lives, and the meanings we attach to them can have additional significance. Overall, my live performance of "There's a Bishop in My Bedroom," compared to my positivist study of mixed marriages, is less objective and scientific. But in its engagement with the past, it is arguably higher in truth value, and it certainly felt more authentic. I'll conclude with some comments on the role of memory in the telling of LGBT history. Although the relationship between memory and history is complex, I think my performance storytelling may be seen as closer to the practice of memory than to the practice of traditional, conventional written history. My own engagement with the past through memory is deeply rooted in evidence. However, that evidence is not usually found in official records or archives. Rather, I have taken it from the private and the domestic sphere, the intimate, coded card, a leather cap from my own life. Furthermore, my use of that evidence and the narrative produced are never neutral. The evidence explicitly serves a pro-LGBT narrative. I adopt a pro-LGBT stance, an overt political commitment that might be compared to, for example, standpoint feminism. My transmission of memory also has less academic and less literate roots than that of history. As a storyteller, I am part of a different tradition, an oral tradition, which is all of familial, Irish, and queer. Oral storytelling is a creative art form which is traditional and enduring in Ireland. There was oral storytelling in my own family home when I was growing up. And also for a generation of older queer people, like myself, there has always been a greater reliance on oral rather than written transmission of both information and stories. A historian may be satisfied with a published article in an academic journal. The restricted dissemination means it is only semi-public. Given that much of our LGBT lives had to be hidden, there is something powerful in making your lives more public. And as a live public performance storyteller and an activist, I seek an audience who I can affect and change. In contrast to traditional conventional written history, which can appear to be almost entirely intellectual, I openly embrace the engagement with the emotional. In performance storytelling, I have at my disposal to achieve this, not just the written word, but my own physical actions and the material objects which I bring with me on stage. Insofar as my performance storytelling is queer, it may be especially suited to conveying the emotional. Vinton Walsh refers to queer performance. Queer performance that, I quote, articulates experiences, oppression, exclusion, and displacement, while imagining and cultivating more accommodating, inclusive, and sustaining modes of personal intimacy, social support, public participation, and cultural belonging. My next performance storytelling show is provisionally titled My Queer History of Northern Ireland. In that show, I propose to engage with what David Cregan has called Queer Memory. Queer memory could be transformative in Northern Ireland in seeking to disrupt the binary and competing Protestant/Unionist and Catholic/nationalist versions of history. This next show will be part of the Outburst Queer Art Festival and will premiere in mid-November in the Mac Theatre Belfast. Thank you.